Hello, I'm Lisa,
I'm Cryss.
and this is the Three of Skeins podcast, episode 57. Believe it or not.
Woo.
Alrighty, so we've got, I got a little thing, something today.
Okay.
I'm very excited about it. Um, I actually finished knitting the back of my Dofuku jacket today. Well, not today, yesterday.
She's been so diligent.
I was, you know what? I really enjoy the stitching on this.
Mm-hmm.
This pattern works the way I like to work. Well, the stitch pattern I chose for it works the way I like to work. It's a pattern that, as you do it, it's easy to see what's to do next. You know, I don't have to, I'm not chained to a piece of paper with the pattern written out,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very logical. So I actually have in the instructions, it says leave the stitches live. So I just ran a line through them.
Oh, God.
So this is the back of my jacket. She is about 22 inches long. And the stitch pattern I'm using is called the Andalusian stitch. It is a 4-row pattern. And so far, I'm really digging it. The only thing I'm doing on it that's a little bit unusual is I am purling. I'm not doing any purl rows. I am knitting backwards on the purl rows. And I think that has made the knitting actually a little faster for me, because I tend to purl more slowly than I knit.
Because purling is evil.
Oh, heavens. Heavens.
But there are a lot of very experienced knitters who say they don't like purling. Purling is different. It's its own thing.
It is different. It is different. But it depends on what style of knitting you do, because there are people who do the method where you have a pin.
Norwegian purling. They have to be a gymnast.
They prefer to purl because it just works better for them that way.
Needle has to do all kinds of around the world loop-to-loop stuff. So no, there's no good way to purl.
Well, dang. All right.
I'm just saying, I'm still traumatized behind purling.
I see that. Oh, it just brought it all up for you. So I did a little pie chart to keep myself motivated. So I'm about 25% finished with the knitting on this jacket. So I was able to color in a quarter of the circle today.
This is the first I'm hearing of the pie chart.
It was really motivating to color it in. Anyway, I don't care. You can look at me like that if you want to.
I didn't say anything.
So I did a sketch to sort of posit what the jacket would look like in my stitch, and I like it. I'm like, yes. It's going to look a little like that. And I actually have a blue dress like that. So I might wear it with that sometime. But so far, I'm pretty happy. The only thing I'm considering...
What kind of paper is that?
It's tracing paper.
Okay. I saw the dimpling.
Yeah.
Do you have parchment?
No. You know what? I did it on tracing paper because I wanted... I bought a body model.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to trace my body model. And I usually do that on our dining table downstairs. So we have a glass table. I sort of make a bootleg light table by putting a lamp under there so I can see through. But I was doing it up here and I didn't feel like
getting all kinds of stuff going on in here that I had no idea about. Okay.
I didn't feel like getting up. So I was like, you know what? Let me just get some tracing paper and I'll do my sketch on the tracing paper. It'll be fine. Sketch is just for me anyway. I'm thinking that I might change how the contrast color lines are made.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want mine to stand out a little bit more because
you would do some sort of raised stitch or something?
Well, I changed to a textured stitch.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm going to do an I-cord instead of just doing a single row of stockinette, because I think it's going to sink in to this. But an I-cord would stand up to all the texture I've added to it without adding a lot of bulk.
Now, I don't know that I understand I-cords completely. Are you going to make an I-cord and then stitch it on, or can you stitch and make an I-cord and attach it to the jacket at the same time?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
You can do it both ways, but I will be doing it integrated into the jacket.
Okay.
Because they want me to attach the pieces together using a 3-needle bind off.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the variations on the three needle bind off that you can do is to build an I-cord while doing the 3-needle bind off. So I'll be doing that.
Really? I feel like the gift with all the equations. What is she talking about?
Actually, it was so funny because I was just reading about that earlier this week.
About the gift with all the equations?
No, about 3-needle bind off.
Like, what is there to read about it? Okay.
But I think it will give me a nice little raised welt in all the places where, so every place you see pink, it'll be I-cord, and it will stand up to the texture that I've added to this. So I'm gonna be happy, and it's just gonna be that one minor little change. But that's what's going on. I started the front of my jacket last night because I've been watching, I've been marathoning my way through House of the Dragon. So House of the Dragon's getting me through, man.
We have a 1-week free trial of HBO, so you got to be about it.
Yeah.
Like, keep it moving.
I would love to know if you guys have watched it, because I know it's over now, but it's new to me. What do y'all think of Daemon Targaryen? He has been touted as some sort of romantic hero, and I'm like,
I have some issues with Rhaenyra, but we ain't gonna get into it.
My main issue
is with the husband of hers.
Laenor has some issues too.
I don't like what he just did to his parents. That wasn't right.
Yeah.
Not down with that.
Yeah. Because when his parents found out, but you know what? That little setup didn't make any sense. He was having a sword fight. How did he end up burned beyond recognition?
You know what? I had a question in the moment, but I was just like, I don't think that's the point, so we're gonna go past it.
But Daemon, used that divorce rock with his first wife. Then,
you know what? I would like to say I don't think the rock was the issue. I think the horse was the problem. The rock was mercy.
Then I feel like he neglected his kids and his wife, his second wife, and I've been hearing, "Oh, Daemon Targaryen, he's the man," and I'm like,
I think it's just because people like Matt Smith, but I'm not impressed with Daemon Targaryen.
I wasn't feeling Daemon Targaryen. His brother's right. He should not have inherited.
All of these people, I have issues with his brother. Child, I don't like these characters. They, you know what it is? I have issues with the whole concept of monarchy. And I feel like they're doing a lot of stupid things just to retain the power of monarchy and not considering anyone else, not considering the people that they have to govern, not considering monarchy is ostensibly a responsibility. It's not just like this fun thing you get to do. And so shows like this, where it's really just competition for a crown, it's never going to be my thing.
Rhaenyra said it herself, the wants of the small folk are of no consequence. I was like, dang, girl, just say it out loud. Anyway, I digress.
Sure did get sidetracked. Okay.
As you see, House of the Dragon's on my mind.
These are the things that form like the backdrop of our stitching.
Yeah. Yeah. House of the Dragon's on my mind. What's up with you, Cryss?
Not a damn thing. Let me tell y'all. If you remember, if you've been following our story here, last week I had taken a week off from stitching, but I still did some work. I was working on my Linus jacket and planning my next project. And it wasn't as restful as I had hoped it would be, because I was still like thinking about my projects and swatching a couple of things and whatever. So I accidentally extended that stitchcation, so I actually didn't do anything this week, and this time like my mind got to rest too, because I wasn't thinking about any of my projects, and it was nice.
So it took you about a week to relax enough.
It did,
to let your mind relax.
It really did.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And last night I was thinking about the fact that we were going to be filming today, and I was like, I don't have anything to show you. In fact, you're going to see a thumbnail where I'm holding a ball of yarn, and that was just for show. I did nothing with that.
I was holding something, so she was like, I hold something.
But last night I was thinking about filming and was like, I don't have anything new to show people. And Lisa was working on her jacket and she'd almost finished the back. She's like, "Oh, I have 20 stitches, 20 inches." And I was like, I have nothing. So I was like, I felt like I should go run and start stitching something just so I had something to show today. And then I was like, you know what? That's insane.
Thank you. I'm glad
And I
you got
decided
there.
to just embrace the break and just relax into it. And I will, get started again on my projects tomorrow. But I realized that I have been working all year with no breaks. Like I have just been going serially from one project to the next, the next, the next. And I enjoyed it. But it seems like at 11 months I hit a wall.
Yeah.
11 months straight. So I think I really did need to just stop and refocus. And yeah, it turns out that even if you enjoy the thing you're doing, you might still need to take a break from it.
Exactly.
So like I've made so far 9 garments and 2 bags this year.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It's more than I've ever done. So I guess for me, some people are making more than that, but for me, that was a lot. So, and then because I've designed, this is the first year everything I made is something I designed myself. There's a little bit more work that goes into it. So yeah, I just needed a break. So I'm not even gonna lie to y'all. I have not touched a hook or a tape measure or a stitch marker in a week, and I kind of like it. It's not bad at all. But now I feel like ready to go back to. I don't feel like I'm gonna be making something just to keep up my pace. Now I'm just like, okay, now I want to get back to working on something because now I've rested a little bit.
That sounds healthy. It does. It sounds very healthy. I like that.
So yeah, that's what's been going on or not going on with me.
I, on the other hand, my brain is kind of a buzz, and I'm right in the high. I like it. So you guys know I started my Dofuku jacket kind of by accident, right? I was actually swatching this yarn for the Queen Latifah cape, and it wasn't appropriate. It just wasn't right. But I finally got my sketches together for it. So here we go. I think this is the gray one. Okay, so I'm thinking about doing it with a yarn I have on hand called Whisper Lace. I don't know if this is going to be right, but I haven't swatched it yet. So I drew it in gray just to see if I might like it in gray. And you know what? I wouldn't be mad. The gray is a good color. The yarn I've sent for is Barocco Chai, and it's in the color is called amethyst. It's like a light purpley color. So I also did in purple. I would like it in either one of these colors. I'm very happy with that. So this is Whisper Lace. It is very, very fine.
Which I think is one of its best features, but Lisa,
I don't know, because I don't know if it's gonna have the weight to drape. That's the issue. But I'm gonna swatch it. I'm gonna swatch it.
At that size, the size of the panels you'll be making, it'll drape.
But these balls, see how big and fat this ball is? This ball is 50 grams. It's 440 yards. That tells you how fine a yarn this is. And it's 70% superwash wool and 30% silk. Very nice. And it's even got a little bit of a sheen to it, which I like very much. And who is this from? This is Fiber Natura.
It's Universal.
So this is a yarn from Universal Yarns. Really nice stuff. So this is one of the things I will be working on this week. I'm going to swatch this. I'm going to swatch it single, and I'm going to swatch it double and see which I like best. Which way I like best. What gives me the best fabric for what I want to do. What I do like about it, though, because the original...
Are you planning to just do stockinette, or are you going to do some sort of...
I might still do this. Because I really like it. And I think... And it will give me the look that it has with that horizontal line without it being a harsh line. But what I like about this, it's got a little bit of a halo to it. And the yarn they used for the original had some halo to it. So I like it very much. So we'll see. And I have some that Mom used. So I'm going to use her leftovers for the swatch. so I don't have to bust open a ball in case I
And
don't
if
like
she
it.
does this will be her first finger and weight garment. Lisa has been very adamantly opposed to using finger and weight for garments. She only uses it for socks.
Yeah.
So it could be a momentous occasion. Could be.
I don't know. And the color on this is called Fog. It's number 104. And I do like this shade of gray.
But see, I feel like you're spoiled because knitters get a finer fabric, even at heavier weights, than crocheters do. To get the look I want, I need to go down in the weight of my yarn.
And that's the problem with knitting, though. If I do something that's too fine for the garment, I will get a super flimsy garment. No matter how tightly I knit it, it'll just be flimsy. So we all got our troubles, okay? We all got our troubles. But I like it. I like the way it feels. I like the look. I think it's got just enough halo that I'm going to get the look that the original had. Since I have an open ball already, rather than crack this one open, I'm going to swatch it. So the swatch will be pink. It'll be all right. I'm going to try it single. I'm going to try it double. I'm going to try it held with some mohair and see what kind of fabric I get, because that's really the only way I'm going to know if it will work for that particular project. So that's where I'm at with what I'm calling the Queen's Cloak. But that's what's up. That's what's up in our stitch life. And thank you for joining us. I did want to show you guys one more thing. So I wanted to see the cloak in the two colors, right? But I didn't want to draw the whole sketch over it again because I'm not the fastest sketcher in the world. So since I had most of it done, and I was really inspired because I did not color in the cloak when I first did it because I didn't know what color yarn I was going to end up with. I ended up doing it like paper dolls.
She made a paper doll.
So I just drew over the cloak part of the figure.
Wait, hold that up and then show them this. So.
Yeah. So I just popped it over actually I did a third one. So I just popped it over and I cut out a space in my arm. And I was able to see it in both gray and purple. And there it is.
She be getting into some stuff.
But you know what? I find that visualizing is so important. And that was one of the things that I heard most often in the shop. People would say, well, I just can't see it. So I think what I'm doing for myself is developing tools so that I can see it and I can see it on me, So as you see, I was just able to just pop it right over the top and I was able to get the look like it was already drawn that way, it was a lot of fun. I was that girl that enjoyed her paper dolls very much. So there we go. And I have a place to store this now. So I just kept it in my
cloak cutouts.
I just keep it in my swatch book with my swatches and all the whatnots and my sketches. So, dear sister, what's been going on this week?
Not much. I don't know. Mom had me watching this video today. Crochet DHC.
Hello.
I think her name Janine. Is it Janine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think so.
Hi, Janine.
Hello.
And she was talking about a test crochet she did for a sweater, and that it just came out too big. And she basically made it twice, and it came out too big both times. And Mom and I were talking about fit and sizing things and how you don't know what you don't know. I know we were talking about swatches. We were talking about swatches and the fact that I didn't know what I was really supposed to do with a swatch until I started designing things myself. That was when swatches became a real tool for me that I could actually use to glean information. Because I said that swatching was just this little game I played before I made something. It was just if my gauge matched the one in the book, I won. That was it. But it didn't mean anything beyond that. But when I'm designing something for myself, my swatch tells me how many stitches to make. That first row, those chains I'm gonna do, I only know how many to do to make something in my size, because of my swatch. And I think in general, patterns, I don't know where actually we're supposed to get this information, because patterns don't do a good job of telling you why you're making a swatch. Because your objective should not be to match the designer's gauge. And I know I didn't understand that at all. So my suggestion for people who are making things from patterns is, after you make your swatch, figure out what your gauge is, but don't compare it to the gauge in the pattern. Instead, do the math. So if your garment is supposed to be 20 inches wide and you get 5 stitches per inch, you want to do 100 stitches. That's how you're going to get 20 inches at your gauge.
So you're going to multiply the number of inches
by the number of stitches per inch. And then if you're using the pattern, maybe see which size starts with something close to that 100 stitches. And at your gauge, you should get something that fits you. But no one ever told me to do that. That is something I only know now, because when you are designing something for yourself, there's no information. There's nothing that you can look at to say, oh, this is how many stitches I need to do to make a shirt that's actually going to fit my body. All you have is that gauge swatch. And that's what the swatch is for. It is to tell you how many stitches you need to make. And so you can use it also for patterns. But the other part of that equation is also fit and how you want something to fit you. If you want a close fit or something relaxed or something oversized,
right,
you will also need to know how many inches that represents for you. So for me, like a close fit is usually, just the front or just the back, not all the way around. A close fit is like 18 inches. Relaxed is like 20. And then if I want to go oversized, I would go above 20 inches. So you also need to know how many inches you want a panel of fabric to be to fit you. And then once you know how many stitches you're getting per inch and how many inches you want your fabric to be, you should have at least the beginnings of the information you need to get the kind of fit that you want. But again, I don't know if this information is out there more for knitters, but I haven't seen any crocheters
honestly though
talking about that.
At first, that's what we're all told. You make that swatch, and here's what we all get. Make the swatch. If it comes out to 4 inches, right? If it comes out to 4 inches, you've gotten gauge. If it's bigger than 4 inches, you're going to go down a needle size. If it's smaller than 4 inches,
go up.
And that is all we're told.
Exactly.
That is all we're told. But we don't know why we're doing it. That's why I think so many people resist swatching, because it feels like an unnecessary extra step, because that swatch is not telling you information. Exactly. So because that's the paradigm for knitting and crochet, really, we're all here trying to match the gauge of some invisible person we'll never see or meet. And I know
you're probably using different needles. You're probably using different yarn. The humidity where you are is different.
Yes.
I mean, there are so many factors at play.
And that's why also we get people focused on, okay, I can only buy the yarn that the sample was made in.
Because it seems like a guarantee that you'll get gauge.
Although it's no guarantee at all.
You don't want to get gauge. You want to figure out your gauge.
Yes.
And from there, you can figure out the size you need to make your piece of fabric.
But that's a 2-part equation. The other thing is you have to measure yourself.
Well, yeah.
You have to measure yourself. And that's
I'm
another thing.
assuming that
No, because no one tells you. No
but
one tells you. A lot of people pick a size by their commercial dress size or their
the bust
bra
measurement.
size or what have you. But have you noticed that most patterns don't just give you a set of bust measurements? A lot of them are labeled small, medium, large. And
Usually,
somewhere you have to dig down and find, well, what does that mean?
now the ones I see usually say a series of inches for the bust.
Yeah.
But
some of them do.
If you're not one of those exact numbers, I'm already lost. I'm like, well, so which size is that for me?
Exactly.
And I would just end up picking one.
And that's what a lot of people do. They pick one. Well, I'm usually a medium. So, medium. So you need to know your numbers of your body, and you also need to know the numbers in your swatch. And what that means to me is, because here's the thing, I will almost never get row gauge. So my swatch can be 4 inches wide when I was doing 4-inch swatches.
And I would just ignore that. Because I was always like, oh, I can make it longer if I need to.
Yeah, but it matters sometimes. Mm-hmm. It does. It matters sometimes. But my stitches tend to be a little bit swashed. So mine's almost always shorter. So I don't even worry about the 4-inch gauge swatch described in most patterns anymore. They'll tell you where it says gauge, knit, 22 stitches for 30 rows. And that should be a 4x4 swatch. And I can almost guarantee mine will never be a 4x4 swatch. So what I do now is I knit much larger swatches. I go ahead and I knit. Usually, my minimum is like 6x6 now. They can be bigger depending on what.
That's usually about where I try to do my swatches.
It depends on what the situation is. So here's a recent swatch. All right, that's a healthy swatch, and it is approximately 6x6. It's 6.5 inches wide, and it's 6.375 inches tall. So that's the level to which I measure it. I usually measure it to 2 to 3 decimal places out.
And I also do not try to measure an inch on the swatch.
No.
And then count how many stitches are in that inch. I measure the width of the whole swatch and the height of the whole swatch.
Yeah.
And then do the math to figure out how many stitches.
That's a bad phrase.
Okay.
We all say and do the math. And my question used to be, well, what's the math?
So the math is you're going to take the number of stitches. If you're trying to figure out your row gauge, you take the number of stitches in your row and divide it by the number of inches in the width. Mm-hmm. So you have 30 stitches and your swatch is 6 inches. You're getting 5 stitches per inch.
Now notice that both the knitter and the crocheter are describing the exact same method. It doesn't matter which one of these things you're doing for this part of the equation. You're making stitches, you're making rows, no matter what hook or needle you're using.
And if you get a decimal, that's fine. Do not round.
Yeah, girl, don't do it.
Don't round. Where you're going to do your rounding is if you decide how many stitches you need for your row, for that first row to get like 20 inches, and it comes out to like 100.8 stitches.
Yeah.
Then you round up to 101 stitches, or you can round down to 100 if you want. But do not round when you get your gauge, because that decimal is going to be present for every single inch. So if you get 4.5 and you round it up to 5, you're going to get half a stitch more for every single inch, and it's going to come out bigger than you expected.
Way bigger.
Yeah. So if you get a decimal, use that decimal when you're figuring out how many stitches you want your fabric to be.
So for this particular swatch, I got a stitch gauge of 3.846 stitches to the inch. So when I tried to figure out what I was supposed to cast on, I knew I needed the back of my sweater to be, I'm going to make up a number right now, 22 inches wide. I don't remember what it is. 22 inches wide. So I multiplied the 3.846 by 22 to get the number of stitches I would need to
And
cast on.
that's the point where you round.
Yeah. So if I had
to get a
gotten,
whole number of stitches.
I had gotten something, I forget what I got, but I did get a decimal number. So I believe I rounded it down because it was the number that worked best for my multiple, for my pattern.
And once you get that number, you can finagle it a little bit if your stitch pattern requires a certain multiple.
Yeah.
But you do it after you find out the number of stitches you need for your first row.
Yeah.
That's when you do all your adjusting. But if you get, and how many decimal places you go to is a judgment call. I usually only do one. You can do two. At a certain point, you're not really ridiculous. Getting more precise information. But if you get a decimal in your gauge, don't round.
Well, I do 3 because Shirley Payton, who is a goddess of knitting, said in her design book, go to 3. And with the type of pattern she does, if she tells me to go to 3, I'm going to 3. And that's the only reason I do 3.
But that's how you use your swatch. And I mean, I learned this trial and error. I didn't have a resource that I could go to. When I was making things from patterns, the swatch was just novel. I usually ripped out my swatch. I would do the swatch and then rip it out and start my project with the same yarn. Like, that was as much as I thought about my swatch.
They say I have to do this swatch, all right? But that's how we all approach it in the beginning, because like I said, if you know, that's what we're all told. Well, if you get the 4 inches, oh, you got gauge, you're good. But the other thing is too, you have to be really careful how you're measuring. So it might be just about 4 inches, but every 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch off you are in your measurement, that's going to show up in the size of your garment. And one of the ways you can see that you're measuring very accurately is once you've done some work on your garment, you measure it and it's coming out right on size and you're like, okay. But what I like to do is I will put my swatch down on a flat surface. I measure with a ruler, something solid rather than a tape measure.
Use a hard ruler.
Because I find that there's a lot less fudging I can do with the ruler than with the tape measure.
I usually use a tape measure, but I just make an effort to hold it taut. Yeah. I don't let it slack at all when I'm measuring the swatch.
Yeah. So, that's the other thing. You got to measure and measure accurately in order to get the right number to multiply. Because like Crystal said, if you're half a stitch off, that's a half a stitch every single inch. And those stitches add up.
They do. So hopefully that was helpful. I am by no means an expert. And
no, neither of us are.
Everything I make, I learn something. Like, oh, that's how you do
that. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that information is just a good place to start. And it's more than I had when I started.
I think it's more than all of us had, because that's what's out there in the air. Okay, if you just start out,
I think it's a convenient shorthand. Yeah, like get gauge, but that doesn't mean anything really.
But we all have had experience. At least I know I have, where I thought I got gauge,
and then it came out different. The size was not what you expected.
Way different, either way too big or way too small.
Because as you're stitching, things are going to change, and if you only did that 4-inch swatch, you had unrealistic expectations.
Oh, you know what? That's another good piece of information. Make your swatch bigger.
Yeah. Most designers that I've heard talking about this say that.
Yeah, make your swatch
at least 6 inches. So that is what I do. My swatches are usually about 6 inches.
If I'm doing something that's like a lace repeat or something, I'll do at least 2 to 3 repeats, depending on what size yarn I'm using. Just so I get, and you know what? It kind of works too, because it gives you a chance to kind of learn your pattern and everything. And also, I would do the swatch exactly the way I intend to do the pattern. or I intend to do the project. So I decided that I was going to do backwards knitting. So I knit the swatch knitting backwards on the purl rows too, because my gauge would be radically different if I purled rather than knit backwards. So it would pay to think about your modifications and do the modification on the swatch too, because it'll tell you how things are going to work out and how it's going to affect the size of what you're doing.
Well, where do you find that? Like, I still don't know. I still don't know where I would find that particular information.
Well, it's not going to be in most of your pattern books. I'll tell you that much, because like everybody else, when I first started buying knitting books, I bought all the pretty pattern books. I did.
For me, it was always like about the number of patterns in the book. I felt like I was getting more bang for my buck if there was like 20 or 25 patterns as opposed to like 10 or 12. So that was really all I cared about, how many patterns were in the book.
You could get me with a really cute set of pictures. And if I went through and there was like 4 things that I really loved, I was like, all right, yes, let's do this. But it took me a little while to realize, sweetie, you don't know enough to do these patterns, and they don't come in your size, and they don't, nah. So that's when I started buying technique books, and that's where I started getting the information I really needed. One I can suggest is called Good Measure by Deborah Newton, and it's all about how to make things that come out the size you expect them to, that you want them to. Because most of the time, it's not the swatch that's lying to you. It's an accumulation of errors. And we've all been there. My measuring was a little off. You know what I had to start to do too? I write down the number of stitches I cast on for my swatch, so I don't have to rely on counting them, because I've missed a couple of stitches. So if I base my gauge, like I have 25 stitches in this swatch, but if I thought I counted 22.
Oh yeah, oh dear.
Oh dear, indeed. So as soon as I cast on my stitches, I count them before I start really knitting, so I know how many stitches I started with in the first place. And now I have accurate information to base my math on. Same with the rows. Every 10 rows or so, I put in a stitch marker on that 10th row. That way I can count my rows accurately. Because, in some stitches, the rows hide, so it's hard to count them. So imagine you didn't have the right number of stitches that you thought you had. First error. Then maybe your tape measure was a little off. Another error.
I live in mortal terror of inaccurate tape measures. I saw this picture of 2 tape measures side by side, and the numbering was completely different. And now I'm just like, I'm convinced no tape measure is right, and I'm really worried about it.
Ever since I saw that, I checked mine. I did, because I lived in mortal fear because the errors accumulate, and then you think you did everything you plan to do, and your thing comes out this big or that big.
It's a sweater for you and a friend.
Exactly.
At the same time.
At the same time. You guys know what happened when I did that top with the drop stitches, and I didn't do the drop stitches in my original swatch. Jesus Christ, that thing was big. It was everywhere.
And the new one fits perfectly.
It does.
It fits perfectly.
It does. But that meant I needed to do my swatch the way I was going to do the thing. I had to drop the stitches. And I counted, and there was 8 stitches dropped around. So I dropped 8 stitches in the swatch. So I had to do a swatch big enough that I could drop 8 stitches. And here's the joke. Oh my God. When I dropped the stitches, this thing went from being something like 8 inches wide to almost 11 inches wide. I was like, no wonder. I mean, that explained it right there. But I did not know that. Yeah, here it is. I have the exact numbers. So the swatch went from being 9 inches wide to 11.625 inches wide. That was going to make a difference in how big my thing was.
A little tiny itty bit.
But because of how you drop the stitches at the end of the knitting. I didn't know until this thing was pretty much done. And it was like, and it went from this to wah. So all those type of things can happen, but you would know about it if you worked all of that out on your swatch.
So I keep saying that even if you're not going to design your own things from scratch, there is some of this stuff that some of this knowledge that you want to bring to working with patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Because think of the pattern as like an ideal situation, right? This designer got everything perfect for something that fits them.
Yep.
And then they started with that one size and they made alterations based on that original number and they tweaked it to create stitch counts for other sizes. But there was one size that was right.
Yes.
And the others are like guesstimations because no one's making this in every size. That's why you have testers. So you really, unless you're somehow the exact same size as the designer, you really can't count on the pattern being the right fit for you, even if your bust size is listed.
Right.
So you need to know how to fit a garment to yourself, even if you're working from someone else's pattern.
Yeah, I mean, even little things. I'm not even suggesting that you have to like go into like major tailoring, but if you know a certain length is what looks best on you, at least that length adjustment, learn how to do that and learn how to know how many rows you're going to need to do in order to make that length that you really like. You can do that. You can calculate how many rows there are from your swatch. The same way you can calculate how many rows there will be, how many stitches there will be from your swatch. So you know how much room you have to play with in case there's, decreases or shaping of some sort, where you can fit it in. And that's where the schematic comes in. Now, I'm a little bit prejudiced against patterns that don't have a schematic. I am very suspicious of those. Especially for a garment. I'm like, but how wide are them fronts supposed to be?
Because that was the next thing I had to learn how to do. Once I learned what the heck I was doing with that swatch, I had to learn how to draw my own schematics and figure out, what sleeve length I needed, before I just randomly started stitching.
I'm just going to keep making this sleeve. Yeah. Now, you guys know I pretty much use patterns all the time, but even though I'm starting out with a pattern that has its own schematic, I will usually redraw the schematic because, Lisa's not hunting down the yarn that the pattern was made in, and I may not even do it at the same weight because that's the other thing. Once you can understand what your swatch is telling you, once you speak swatch, you can pretty much use whatever yarn you have. I will redraw my schematic and I will put my numbers on it. Because, I do find that sometimes the schematics are a little bit busy because they have the numbers for all the sizes.
Yeah.
And even if I wasn't making any changes, I would just do a quick sketch of the schematic and just have my numbers on it. Just so I have a clean, slate to deal with. But I put the number of inches in each of my pieces, and I also have started writing in the number of stitches. And that means I can work mostly from my schematic, and that's been working for me very, very well.
And the schematic also tells you a lot of information about the construction because it'll tell you, for instance, the body is just a rectangle, or if there's any shaping, is it narrowing for the waist and then increasing again for the hips, or are we just narrowing all the way down? So those kinds of things will help you with the next sweater that might be done in a similar fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So schematics are really useful. They're really, really useful.
Yeah. But it's all about learning how to read them. And that's usually not in the pattern. So for a long time, the only information I had was in the pattern. And I think a lot of us are in that place. All the information I had was in the pattern. Now, I was lucky in some ways because I had a little bit of sewing background, although knitted garments are usually not put together like sewn garments. But I had at least an idea of some construction. But you might want to look at some technique books.
How are they different?
Well, a lot of knitting patterns have no seams. You're not sewing them together. You're not sewing in a dart.
I always did seamed sweaters for like the longest time.
Yeah. You don't do darts the same way. I'm not going to pinch out fabric in a knitted garment. I'm going to do my darts. I'm going to decrease in darts or do short rows to make darts or whatnot. And then some patterns are so line by line that you can't even get a sense of what's happening because you're going 42 stitches, you're decreasing, then you might do another 12 stitches and then you increase twice. But that doesn't add up. At least in my mind, it didn't add up to I learned how to make this thing. You know what I mean? I was following the pattern very, very blindly. And that's what really got me. And then if I ran into a glitch that I called it a glitch, but I just didn't understand what the pattern was telling me. I would just put that thing aside and cast on something else.
Oh.
So that's what finally drove me to get some books, to get some more information. So that, when I ran into something, I could at least understand. Like when I first started knitting, I got this book called Knit Speak that had come out. And all it did was translate pattern speak into English for you. And I found that very helpful. And I think there is, I don't want to be, I may not be accurate on this. I think there's a crochet answer book. I had gotten the knitting answer book too because it was very helpful. But there's also a crochet answer book and it tells you how to measure your gauge, swatch, and all of that. So that was what started getting me out of buying the pretty pattern books that I had absolutely no use for. Couldn't make any of that stuff. And to getting technique books that was helping me to move further towards the path of being able to make the things I was interested in making.
I think crochet is a little behind in the area of technique books, unfortunately. But knitting books can help.
Yes. Yes, because measuring a swatch is measuring a swatch. You do it the same way whether you're knitting or crocheting.
And like I learned how to do a shawl collar from 6,000 plus pullover possibilities because I learned it was just a rectangular piece of fabric that gets put into a rectangular neckline. And once I just understood the shapes I was working with, I was able to do a shawl collar. So the good thing about that book is that it pulls apart the different kinds and shapes of sweaters and tells you what shapes each piece of the sweater is going to be. So unfortunately, knitting books are what we have right now as crocheters, but it's not so different that you can't really use it.
Particularly books about how to put together a garment, like that 6,000 plus sweater possibilities by Melissa Leitman. If you want to make garments, that's a great place to start. And it's kind of nice because you can literally pick and choose each element of the garment you want to make and come up with garments of your own. I don't know, what would you need to know as a crocheter? How did you find the instructions for that? Did you bother with the instructions or did you just look at the shape and go, oh, I can make that shape?
I mostly just look at the shape.
Yeah.
It really depends on what style of sweater you're making because anything that involves extensive increasing and decreasing or shaping, you're going to read a little bit to understand where the shaping is done. And there might be proportions where, you want one part to be a certain multiple of another part. So if it's something that's a little bit more complex or unfamiliar to you, you definitely want to do some of the reading. But basically for me, if it's something that's a rectangle, I can usually figure it out.
I think most of us can make a rectangle. So don't be hesitant to really take a look through knitting books. I told you my mom absolutely loves knitting the old way. because it's about making traditional shape sweaters, but it's more about proportions than, you know, line by line by line telling you how to do it, because it would be very hard for a knitter to follow that kind of pattern, and the reverse to follow for a knitter for a crochet pattern. But if it's telling you, well, put half the stitches on the back, it doesn't matter what stitch it is.
I think once you figure out what it is you like to make, you need to figure out what needs to be in your tool set.
Yes.
To help you make that thing. Whether you're designing your own or working from a pattern, it's actually the same tool set. I think that's really the important thing. And so just having a good foundation in a couple of areas will help you even if you're working from patterns. But it behooves you to figure out, well, what do I need to know? And usually when you try to make something and it goes wrong, you'll be like, I don't know that.
Yeah, that's about right.
So hopefully, you feel inspired to seek out resources, because it's not all in the pattern.
No, Joe.
That is the big takeaway here. Everything is not in the pattern. It's just not.
It would be impossible.
It really would.
I've downloaded a couple of 36-page patterns. They're intimidating.
I've noticed that patterns have gotten longer and longer and longer.
They're a little bit intimidating. Can you recommend a couple of crochet resources? How did you find the complete crochet course for a garment maker?
I feel like complete crochet course is good for learning individual techniques. Like he has a good section on different styles of color work. And that's actually where I learned how to do intarsia. I haven't really used it to help me make a garment, but there's a lot of information in there and a lot of beginner patterns. So, and I have a lot of faith in Shannon Bowlesby patterns. I've worked from them, and they're just really well written. Yeah. I know someone who talks a lot about different types of sweater shapes and constructions is Dora Orenstein.
Oh yeah.
And I think, is the book called Custom Crochet Sweaters?
Yes, I think it is.
She has one. And
top down?
Yes. There's another one about top down sweaters.
Yeah.
And if you look at custom crochet sweaters before any of the patterns start, there's like a nice chunk of that book that's just explanation. She's just talking to you about how to make sweaters. She also has a book about just fabric creating. Is it called Creating Crochet Fabric? It might be something like that. But so if you like get yourself a nice little Dora Orenstein library, she will talk you through each of the components, creating your own fabrics, and then putting the sweaters together. And she will give you a lot of useful information. So I definitely recommend checking out Dora Orenstein.
And that's strictly crochet.
Yeah.
Crochet side.
I don't think she knits.
I don't think she does. She's learning Tunisian.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't wait to see what she does. It's going to be amazing. Because her designs are like lovely.
She has this houndstooth skirt that I want to make. It's so cute. But I hope that was helpful because, like I said, I'm really just flubbing my way along.
But we learn with every project.
Yeah. But I feel like I still don't have like the whole picture where I feel confident. Like I'm just gonna make anything I want to make. But it's starting to become clearer. Yeah. So that's what we have.
Yeah,
that's what we have to offer. I hope I made sense.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I was just talking.
Oh, you know what? I do have to make an announcement. I'm going to put in the description bar all the books that we talked about. And there's also going to be a link to my class at Vogue Knitting and the class I'm offering, the Maker Studio. Down in the description bar. Do check it out. Thank you.
And we keep forgetting to say, like, comment, subscribe,
share,
please. All the good things.
And tell us about how things are going with your making. Is everything coming out the size you expect it to? Because it doesn't always for any of us.
I made this sweater once. It's supposed to be double-breasted. And so I had like 2 rows of buttons going. Came out a little small. So now there's just 1 row of buttons down the center. It was like We'll make it work.
Still works.
It happens.
It happens. But as you get more into talking with your swatch, it happens a lot less. Let's just say that. I think that's it for us today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us. See you next time.
Stay stitching.